look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and, of course, iHeartRadio. And we are the only all-cannabis broadcasting network on iHeartRadio, coming at you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, bringing you the information around the world as to why it's so important to end prohibition. It is Wednesday, and Wednesday we like to salute all the amazing people at LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and we've been doing that for about 5 years now here on the big broadcast, and we've been doing it with the joint founder of LEAP, Peter Criss, and next week will be his last week as the official joint host on the Wednesday broadcast. He is going to go off like any other cowboy, riding him off into the sunset, looking for some peace and quiet. And, Peter, it has been a lot of fun to have you come on every week, week in and week out, and bring to the table the information that you have so learned and shared with all of your members. I want to say thank you so much for making that happen.
Well, Casper, I couldn't have done that if you hadn't invited me. And the fact that I've been here 4.5 years tells you that it was as much a joy to be joining you once every Wednesday as it was for you to be joining me. Because if it wasn't a joy, I wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks.
Well, now you said you was going to do this until it was no longer any more fun. So,
right.
So it's no longer fun to be on the show each week now?
Well, no, it's still fun, but it's old. You know what I mean? It's old. And police work was fun, too. But after you do it for 20 years, it gets kind of old. And you start finding yourself repeating yourself and doing the same things over and over. And also, I think you always have to remember that in particularly a movement like we're involved in, at LEAP, this is a long-term thing. And there's people that come and go in these kind of movements, and you get the benefit that I hope LEAP got as much out of me as they could squeeze. And now it's time for me to back off and for other new people to come in. Leonard Freeling is going to be taking over the show starting after the first of the year, and he's going to bring his twist to it. And that's all very important stuff. So I'm just big on diversity, you know, and one person in one place for too long is one thing. Not when you're the host. When you're the host, you got to be, because there's other shows you're doing and stuff like that. But for this position, and also it's for me. The reason, and I know you've heard this of me before, the reason at 17 I decided that I wanted to be retired before I was 45 years old was because I wanted the freedom to do what I wanted to do every minute of every day. And basically I've been doing that, and when I wanted to do Time for Hemp, I did it. And now it's time to bring that to an end and kind of sit back. Also, my lovely wife just retired about 1.5 years ago, so we have more time together and stuff. So it's, and life's a kick, Casper.
It is. Now, when you started in the police force, unless I'm mistaken, alcohol was still outlawed, and
Actually, you're almost right, because in Mississippi, the prohibition on alcohol, I don't think ended until 1970, and I started on the police department in 1969. So there was still a little bit of that left around. But no, I tell people that I started before the militarization of police started. And what I mean by that is I started on the police department in 1969. And I came into a police department and I was trained and I trained officers. Here's when I was a field training officer and I would have a rookie with me for 6 weeks. One of the things they would hear from me almost every day is that the strangest thing about our job is every time you arrest somebody, you're arresting your boss. And the reason I say that is we work for the people. And then all of a sudden in 73, you had Nixon come along and declare a war on drugs. And if anybody wants to know where the militarization of police started, that's where it started. When Nixon brought the term war into law enforcement. And that changed the people we arrested from being our bosses, who we worked for, to being the enemy who we were fighting against. And as you have done that over the last 40 years, you have seen what you get from that, particularly when you're hiring young people in their early 20s to be police officers. And now, particularly for the last 40 years, there's a lot of them that came from war zones, so they know all about war. And I just want to tell every listener out there, if you want to know the difference between police and military, and some of you might be thinking, well, that job gets kind of, there's people shooting, it's like the military. Let me tell you the difference between police and military. If you're in the military and you're taking fire from a 10-unit apartment building over there on the hill, what you do is you call in air power or artillery and you blow up the apartment building because you're at war. That's the enemy. If you're a police officer and you're taking fire from that 10-unit apartment building over there, you have two jobs. One job is to get the guy shooting at you, and the other job is to protect everybody else in the building. And that's the difference between those two professions. And they're vastly different. I worked with a guy when I first came on the job back in 69. He was pretty near retirement, but he had been on the job before World War II started. He got drafted, had to go away, and then came back. And he used to say that if you're going to have a military and a police department in your country, you should train the military on one coast and the police department on the other coast. That's how far apart they should be. And now we're blending them together in this thing we call the war on drugs. And it's not a war on drugs, it's a war on people. You don't make war on inanimate objects.
Well, this war on drugs that was escalated by Richard Milhouse Nixon has also played havoc with all of our civil rights. It's caused the police to do more than I think they were looking for. I'm talking about things like forfeiture as an example. I think before the war on drugs, forfeiture wasn't even a tool that was being used on everyday citizens, and now it's a pretty common practice for a person to wake up and find that their bank accounts are frozen and their assets have been seized and they have nothing, but they've not been charged.
It's interesting. We have two types of forfeiture in America. One of them I support 100%, and that is called criminal forfeiture. And what that is let's say, Casper, you've been robbing banks for the last 10 years. And finally we catch up with you, we arrest you. And when we arrest you, we find you in this house out in the country. You got a barn that's full of Ferraris and all these cars you've been buying with all this money you stole from the bank. So what we do is we seize all that property when we arrest you, and we hold it. And when you are convicted of that crime, we then start a civil action and take that property away from you. The other type of forfeiture we started back in the late 70s, and that's called civil forfeiture. And the way I like to explain it to people is this. You're driving downtown, wherever, you pull up to the red light, a guy runs over, yanks open the car door, sticks a gun in your ear, orders you out of the car, gets in the car, drives away, and keeps the car. What do we call that? And most people say it's a carjacking. And my answer is, oh, I forgot to say one thing. The guy that did that stuff has a badge. That means we call it civil forfeiture. And the way you get your car back is you got to sue that police department that stole your car, and you have to prove in court that you weren't down in that neighborhood to buy drugs. Because that's the accusation they're making. They're not arresting you for anything. They're not charging you with anything. They have no obligation to prove that you were doing anything illegal. They're just taking your property because that's what they think, and you have to prove them wrong. Now, I explain that to people, and I've had people actually say to me, well, that doesn't happen in America. And my answer is it's happening every day in America. And I'll tell you why it happens. Here's what we as a species do. If we have a policy that doesn't appear to be working, but we really, 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 really believe in the policy, we start doing all kinds of bizarrely stupid things to make it seem like it's working. And that's what we're caught up in with things like civil forfeiture, all kinds of other things. Look what we're doing to people now. Our drug czar just said the other day, and I love this statement, I've heard it from every drug czar we've ever had. We understand that this drug problem in America is fundamentally a criminal or a healthcare and an educational problem. And now one reporter asked the question that I thought should be answered. If this is truly a healthcare and an educational problem, what other healthcare and educational problem should we spend $80 billion a year on the criminal justice system to deal with? If this is a healthcare and an educational problem, we should be dealing with this through healthcare and education, not through the criminal justice system. Just one old cop's point of view.
Well, and it's also made it so that, according to reports, there have been some police forces around the United States that when they are in need of equipment, or if it's getting close to the holidays and they got a holiday wish list, that promotes arrest. And it's also caused decision-making processes as to what neighborhoods would suddenly go under surveillance and suddenly be surrounded by police officers, and where arrests would be made. Because you can get more Mercedes-Benz and Rolls-Royces if you start making arrests in rich neighborhoods than, if you roll up into the hood, so to speak.
Right. Well, we have police departments that are basing their budgets on expected forfeitures that they're going to make in the future. I mean, it's bizarre, but that's what we're. I'll give you a better one, Neil. Yeah. So I was talking to somebody else here, Casper. I'll give you a better. We have now in the United States of America privately owned and operated prisons. That means that we have people that are making not just a living like I made off of police work, off of arresting people, but now we are talking about people that are making a profit off of taking people's liberty away from them. If you live in a free society and people make a profit off of taking your liberty away from you, you do not live in a free society. That's like the definition of not being free. That's what slave owners made off their slaves, was a profit. This is not what this country is supposed to be about, but that's what we have turned into. And again, we have the responsibility for this. The thing that amazes me about this is, and I like to think of alcohol prohibition when I mention this, they learned very quickly that they couldn't make alcohol go away. I mean, no matter how much they banned it, it was still going to be there. But you know what they finally figured out? That alcohol didn't create people like Al Capone. Prohibition of alcohol was what created Al Capone. And here's the interesting thing about that. The prohibition you can do away with, because you can vote it out and be gone. Not like the drugs, not like the alcohol, not like the gambling and the prostitution. Those things are going to be with us as long as there's people on this planet. But the prohibition we choose, and we can choose not to have that. It just, once, I think that the light really comes on for a lot of people once you look at this past the drug war. And we have a history in this country of morality policing. It used to be illegal in almost every state in this country to be gay. I mean, we actually arrested people and put them in jail. And I am always struck by the irony that we arrest a gay male or a gay female and then we send them to an all-male and all-female prison. That always struck me as a little odd all by itself. But those are the kind of, we used to arrest women in this country for trying to own property and for standing up and speaking, for trying to vote. I mean, we have a whole history of this stuff in this country that we did for a long time. And I was just going to touch on next week, but I don't want to, because next week is the anniversary. In fact, when they're going to be hearing this is in fact the anniversary, but I want to do the show more about that next week. But it's the anniversary next on the 17th of the Harrison Narcotics Act. And that's what started all of this stuff. And there's only thing I'm going to say about it today, and like I said, I'll talk about it more next week. The only thing I want to say about it today is the Harrison Narcotics Act went into effect 5 years before alcohol prohibition went into effect. So it was the same attitude that brought us alcohol prohibition that brought us the Harrison Narcotics Act. But you'll have to tune in next week to hear more about that.
All right. Well, with that said, let's go to a commercial break and pay our bills and remind people that there's a Google app for their Android phones that they can find in the Google store for free to download for Time for Hemp and share us with your friends. And that we are about 20 different broadcasting hosts bringing you material from all around the world about how important it is to end prohibition. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
car off, says we're moving on. Cruising down the highway, living FM on. I rolled out the window, looked up in the sky. I'm a believer, I can see the pigs do fly. My daddy's busted. My daddy's busted by the police. My daddy's busted. My daddy's busted as can be. Mama's packing stashes in the house. She packs them 1, 2, 3. Well, drove down to the airport, bring my daddy home. Looked him up with a sniffer dog, searched him with a comb. Dad rolled out the window, he looked up in the sky. He's a believer, he can see the pigs can fly. My daddy's busted. My daddy's brought down by the law. My daddy's busted. My daddy's busted now for sure. Mama's keeping score back in the house. She keeps it 2, 3, 4. The cops have taken photographs, shot them from the sky. You're a believer, you can see the pigs do fly. Your daddy's busted. Your daddy's busted by the police. Your daddy's busted. Your daddy's down upon his knees. Well, mama counts her blessings in the house. She counts 1, 2, 3. My daddy's busted. My daddy's busted by the law. My daddy's busted. My daddy's busted now for sure. Well, mama's getting lessons on guitar from the man next door.
And information. See what all the buzz is all about. It's time for hemp. It's time for hemp.
Yeah, baby, it is time for hemp all around the world. And remember, anytime you hear the word joint on this big broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their vaporizers, or roll up a joint to take time for hemp. It is Wednesday, and we like to salute the hardworking people at Leap, LEAP.cc on Wednesdays. We've been doing so with Peter Chris for about 5 years now, I think. When did you start, Peter?
I think the first one was in August of 10. Let me just check here. 8/5/10 is the first show we did. August 5th of 10, so it's 4.5 years almost.
Wow, time do fly.
It doesn't seem like that, does it?
No, it doesn't. And before that, we were doing Leap with Allison Murden, and Allison's back on the network. She's joint hosting with Al Graham on their Canadian show. And we're going to continue to salute Leap on Wednesdays with Judge Leonard starting next year.
Yeah, Leonard Freeling. Yep.
Yes. And
he's got a much better radio voice than I do.
So what I'm getting at is that, Peter, before you came on as the joint host and after you leave as the joint host, we will continue to salute the organization that you jointly created. And that should give you something to giggle and have fun with.
Oh, yeah, it does. And in fact, I always tell people that my bucket list is empty. I've only had two things in what I would call my bucket list. The first one I put in there when I was 17, and that was be retired before I was 45, and I retired at 42, so I fulfilled that one. And then the next thing was, when I retired, I said I'm going to get involved in this prohibition stuff because I saw the damage it was doing to my old profession. And I cared a lot about the people I used to work with. And I have said from the beginning, and you heard this from the first time you met me, I have no expectation of seeing an end to this policy in my lifetime. I think it's going to take longer than that to change this. And I mean overall, the whole morality policing thing. But I also said that when I take my last gasp, I would like to take it knowing that I had something to do with bringing it to an end. And when they write the history of this movement, I got a feeling they're going to have to mention LEAP. And if they mention LEAP, they're going to have to mention the 5 founders, and there's my place in the history book. So I got everything I wanted. My life is complete.
Well, I fell in love with LEAP when I first came across it on the internet. Oh, gosh, 2005? I think maybe even earlier, because I remember when I came across the website, I was just floored that there are police officers and judges and prosecuting attorneys and even former members of the DEA who think that the war on drugs is a failed policy and are actually working hard to end those policies. No way. I can't believe it. And I think when I called up, Jack Cole was in charge of the organization at the time, and I asked him if he was for real. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. I said, well, anybody in the marijuana movement is just going to think you're all a bunch of, spies.
Oh, yeah. Hey, let me tell you a little story real quick about that. I got into this movement. The first organization the only organization I knew of when I retired in '89 was NORML. So marijuana was never my issue. In fact, drugs weren't even my issue. My issue was prohibition, morality policing. But anyhow, I knew about NORML, so I called down to their Washington office and I said, "You got anything coming up?" And they said, "We got a conference coming up in October." So one of the few times I spent my own money. I spent my own money and sent myself down to that conference because I figured I got to start meeting people that are in this movement. And when I was at that conference, I met people who said they were at a conference the week earlier from an organization I had never heard of that was called Drug Policy Foundation at that time. And so the next year, and those people I talked to were talking about what I was talking about. They were talking about marijuana. They were even barely talking about drugs. They were talking about the policy. So the next year I went to the DPF conference, and I've been at every one of those since 90. And in 92, a group started up here in Syracuse called Reconsider, Forum on Drug Policy. They got a hold of me, asked me if I wanted to be part of it. And I said, well, let's see what's going on. And I became their primary spokesperson for Reconsider through the 90s. In 99, and this is what this is all leading up to, Jack Cole came to his first DPF conference. And I got introduced to him. People said, there's another cop here, So him and I are sitting at the bar in a hotel talking. We had just met, talking cop stuff. And as we were talking, people would walk through the bar and they'd come up to me and say, hey, Pete, how you doing? How's everything going? I haven't seen you in a year. And then they'd walk away, and then another person come up. And after about the 5th or 6th person came up, he looked at me and said, gee, how do you pull that off? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I talk to people here and I tell them I was a narc, and he said, they treat me like I'm still working. And I said to him, well, look, I've been coming to these conferences for 9 years, and none of the people that hung around with me have disappeared. So after 9 years, they figure I'm safe, I said, when you get a couple of years here, they'll feel the same way about you too. And I said, then I said to him, I said, you were a narc, right? He said, yeah. He said, you worked undercover? And he says, yeah. I said, tell me something. He said, what's that? I said, if you came to this conference as an undercover narc, what would you be doing different? And he looked at me for a couple seconds and then smiled and said, nothing. I said, well, you can't really blame him then, can you? But that was part of the transition. He came on board with Reconsider, and he became our second spokesperson. And I think I probably told this story before. And then in late 2001, December, I get a phone call from Jack, and he says, did you hear about that offer from MPP, Marijuana Policy Project? And I said, you mean the $50,000? And he said, yeah. And MPP had thrown $50,000 out on the table for anybody that wanted to start a law enforcement group. So he says to me, do you want to do it? And I said to him, we're on the phone, will you run it? And there was a pause. And Jack said, yeah, I'll run it. And then I said, will you run it? And he said, yeah, I'll run it. And then I said, will you run it? And he said, I've already said twice, yeah, I'll run it. I said, okay. I said, 6 months from now, when you're calling me up complaining about how much work it is, I'm going to remind you that I gave you 3 chances to say no. So the way I like to tell the story of LEAP is Peter Christ, had the idea for LEAP. And if it hadn't have been for Jack Cole, it would still be an idea. Because I knew I was not the guy to run the organization. I don't have those talents and abilities. It's not a level of interest I have to put together an organization. And Jack did a hell of a job. And now we're over 100,000 members, with about 5,000 of them being law enforcement. We're in Brazil, we're in Europe, we're in Canada, we're in India. We're spreading all over the world. I'm trying, and this is my last year on the board with LEAP. At the end of 2015, I'll still be a member of LEAP, but I'll no longer be a board member. If I can leave one more thing behind, it'll make me super happy. Just leaving LEAP behind makes me happy enough that it's there. But if we can definitely define our organization, first off, as a human rights organization, not a drug policy organization. And secondly, and this is the one that's got some people that leave a little nervous, defining the word prohibition as meaning the prohibiting of consensual adult behavior. That should be that's how, when I named this organization, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, that's the way I interpreted the word prohibition. It wasn't just about drugs. It was about prohibiting consensual adult behavior, which should never be a function of an armed, militarized police force, ever. And the reason I say that is this: if you're going to use armed police to enforce morality in your society, there is a question you have to ask yourself first, and that is, whose morality are we going to enforce? If you look at Islam, that has many different sects in it, so different groups, they interpret morality differently amongst themselves. Christianity has different interpretations of what is moral and what is immoral. Hindus, Buddha, all religions have different interpretations of morality. And if you're going to pick one of them and decide that that should be the law of the land, before you make the choice, the suggestion I make is that you read the First Amendment just one more time. Because they said something in there about making laws respecting religion. And we should not be doing that in a free society. And that's what we're doing. We're enforcing morality, one person's thought of morality on the rest of society. That should not be the function of law enforcement.
Absolutely. Because, as we've pointed out, you cannot control human behavior.
Exactly.
It's silly, and it's silly to even think that you can.
Exactly. Oh, well, that's that famous phrase. Every person that's listening to this show has used this phrase sometime in their life. In fact, every human being that has ever lived on this planet at some point in their life has said some form of this phrase. And that phrase is, boy, it seemed like such a good idea when I thought of it. And there's, in fact, you can think of our drug laws. We'll just ban drugs. Everybody will stop using them. It'd be wonderful. Well, that isn't what happens. It's also, I like to remind people, and again, going back to the words we use, when I'm in a Rotary Club, I'll ask, or that type of whatever organization, I'll ask for a raise of hands of people in the audience that are veterans, and a bunch of hands will go up. And I tell them that I'm a veteran too. And I always make this clear. I'm a Vietnam era veteran, not a Vietnam War veteran. Okay, but I was in the service during that period of time, so I was in the service during a war period. And if you're going to send me to war, I want to know something before I go, and that is, how do you define victory? Because I want to know when I can come home. And I'm going to go and fight for my country, and I'll give my life if I have to, but I want to know when the war's over and I can come home. Nixon never defined what the one war on drugs would look like. So I'm going to use World War II as an example. We won World War II. The Allies won World War II. We defeated the Axis. That doesn't mean that every couple months or so we fought the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese again. The war's over. It's done. We're finished. So if we win the war on drugs, that means we've defeated the drugs. We've taken the word heroin and marijuana out of the dictionary. There's no more drugs in our society. And I'll look at my audience and I'll say, raise your hand if you think that's possible. And this is interesting because I've been doing this for a number of years, thousands of people. Not one hand has ever gone up saying they think that we can make drugs go away. Nobody thinks that that's possible. And then what I tell people is, then here's the question you have to ask yourself. If drugs are always going to be part of our society, who do you want to run the marketplace? Do you want it controlled by gangsters, thugs, and terrorists? Or do you think that maybe a regulated, controlled marketplace where we control age limits and distribution points and purity, you think that might be a better system? And it doesn't necessarily change everybody's mind, but it does cause everybody to think about it a little bit.
Well, and you're overlooking, and it's not often stated by the members of your team, but we are talking about like the war. You want to know when it's over so you can go home, but also keep in mind the side of the war that you fought on. We couldn't make any arrest of you. We could not arrest you and take you to our little prison camps and lock you up and make you our little slave laborers, making shirts and telephones for people overseas at 10 cents a day. Whereas the police were able to arrest the citizens and put them into jail, into POW camps, so to speak, and hold them hostage under the guide and the guidelines of this war on drugs and the rules of arbitration in this war on drugs, and force us into slave camps where we have to perform labor while we are incarcerated at a certain low wage. So we would like to see our POWs come home too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they should come home and get an apology from us when they come home for sending them away in the first place. And that's what this comes down to. It's, I don't know if I've done this in a while or whatever, but I always tell people that there's a few words that I have my own definition for. And one of them is the word liberty. And my definition of the word liberty is the right to be as stupid as you choose to be, as long as you do not harm another person or another person's property. Now, a lot of people, when I say that to them, they kind of laugh and they think I'm trying to be funny, and I'm not. I'm dead serious. And I'll tell you why I say this. All throughout our history, the person in whatever group that came up with the new idea was labeled by everybody else in the group as being stupid. If they persisted with that new idea, then the rest of the group labeled them as being crazy. And when everybody else in the group figured out that, oh my goodness, it's a great idea, they were right, we then called them geniuses. All of our geniuses started out by being stupid, crazy people before we caught on that they were in fact geniuses. And here's the problem. If you make laws to get rid of all the now, one thing I want to make very clear, I fully acknowledge that more than 95% of the stupid, crazy people are, in fact, stupid and crazy, okay? I don't think they're ever going to be geniuses. But if you eliminate all the stupid, crazy people, you're also going to accidentally get rid of the geniuses, too. And we can't afford to lose the geniuses. So we have to put up with all the stupid, crazy crap so we can get the benefit from the geniuses that are out there. And that's why liberty is so important, because we all benefit by it. All of us benefit by the fact that a person actually thought that they could talk to somebody around the world on a little device and then went out and invented it. That was crazy. What are you, nuts? There's a show on called, Paula watches it, The Artful Detective, but it's set in 1900 in Toronto. And they always, during the show, they make little references to future inventions and stuff like that.
Right.
And one of the shows, they were on the phone talking, and when the guy hung up the phone, he said, someday we're going to be able to carry these things around with us, these phones, and we'll have them right with us. And the other guy looks at him and says, that's crazy. What are you going to do with all the wires? Right? That's before radio. That's before any of that stuff.
That's exactly right. Well, with that said, let's take a commercial break while people enjoy us on their now wireless devices all around the world at Time for Hemp. Listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Well, I went and had a bowl, good green reefer, a big fat Joe beef, much sweeter. Mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Fire up right now.
Yeah, fire up right now. Be loud, be proud. Come out of the closet and let everybody know that you utilize this wonderful plant known as marijuana, cannabis sativa. I don't care what you want to call it. You got to call it illegal when you talk about it. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world at timeforhemp.com, Tumblr, SoundCloud, and iTunes. And again, I want to say thank you to KDK Distributors for being nice enough to give us a grant to keep us loud, proud, and strong. It is Wednesday, Leap Day. Law enforcement against prohibition. As you can hear, there is some traffic going on outside my window. I apologize. And we are talking to Peter Chris, the joint founder of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And Peter, it's got to be a little interesting as well. We've watched demonstrations here recently all across America, and then we've gotten support from people across seas, almost as if we are a third world country now. Mm-hmm. Because of the police abuse that's going on in this country. What do you have to say to that? I don't think that was such a problem in your original early days, was it?
No, well, we had our own stuff going on back then. If I mention the name Foster and Laurie, does that mean anything to you?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, that was 2 New York City cops who were assassinated on the streets of New York City by the Weather Underground back in the 70s. So it was kind of strange when I was in there too, but not nearly to the extent it is now. Like I said earlier, this comes from the militarization, the separation of police from society, making it appear to be us and them, making cops not look at their people that they're arresting as their boss. And it's I don't necessarily agree that power corrupts, but I'll tell you something. It's very seductive, power. And when you have it, it's very easy to become seduced by it. And I think that that's what you're seeing in a lot of the working people out there, too, is they forget after a while that they weren't always cops, that they were actually civilians that were trained to be cops, and that they would go back to be civilians someday. And it's interesting. You talk about the laws we're trying to change and things, and there's a lot of efforts to decriminalize marijuana.
Right.
And I'm sure you've heard about the stop and frisk stuff up in New York City.
Right.
Okay. Let me point out that we decriminalized marijuana in New York State in 1975. And we still have all this stop and frisk stuff going on. So obviously, decriminalization is not the answer to this problem. I just want to get that out there for those people that are still kicking that word about. It's that terrible, scary L word that we have to get to, and that's legalization. And the reason I use the term L word is because all through the 90s, when I would go to those drug policy conference meetings about the middle of the 90s, people were telling me to stop using the L word because it scared too many people away. So I was just wondering if anybody was recommending that Lincoln not use the emancipation word,
Well, in today's police departments are borderline absolutely powerful and have absolute power. And they do say that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, that part I'll agree with.
Because I know in the 70s, when I was a kid, and in the 60s, we considered police officers to be our friends for a while. Yep. And if a cop came to your door to arrest you, he had to have a written search warrant to go into your house. And they just couldn't freeze your bank accounts. They just couldn't start taking your property out of your house. If they did come and arrest you, they tried to do it in such a way that it didn't kill your family members or your dog, or tear up your furniture or tear up your belongings. They couldn't shut down your bank accounts. They couldn't lock up your business. And there's a lot of things that they could not do. They couldn't show up in your front yard with a tank and 35 people surrounding you for stupid stuff, like they do today.
Oh yeah. Well, it's and again, that all started with the use of that term war. That's when you tell people they're at war, everything changes. The whole dynamics change. And I don't think that was an accident. I have this vision of the White House sitting around and deciding, well, what are we going to do next? And then, why don't we get involved in this drug thing? Okay, well, if we're going to set up a new policy, we're going to have to name it something. And I can just picture this happening. Somebody sitting in the White House and saying, why don't we call it the new prohibition? And everybody else saying, no, everybody knows that doesn't work. Let's call it something else. So they decided we call it a war.
Well, and Johnson did that with poverty.
Yep, exactly. Of course, poverty, we weren't arresting people for being poor.
We are now.
Oh, yeah, I know we are. I know. But that wasn't the intent of the war on poverty, to make poverty, or maybe it was to make poverty go away, but not to make it go away through the use of military tactics. The war on drugs had military tactics built into it from day one because it's going to be enforcement. And enforcement takes force. It's in the word. So that's where we're at. We put ourselves here.
Well, exactly. And we just touched upon something that is really weird, too. Now we've gone from policing morality to policing your circumstances. I mean, I really don't know that many people who would prefer to sleep on the street and prefer to wander around neighborhoods begging for food for themselves and their kids if they could have a place to stay and be able to go to a grocery store and pay cash for an apple.
Right.
So their circumstances have now caused them to have to beg on the street, on highways, have to sleep in parks, and to sleep in under bridges. And there are now so many cities in the United States that are making it against the law to feed the hungry without a permit, to sleep in the street, to sleep in a park. And what now? I mean, we are arresting people because you're sleeping in a park and taking what little belongings they've got and trashing them and putting them behind bars for society to take care of, and giving them a record for loitering and for panhandling and whatever else they can come up with charges. Now, this is getting beyond stupid.
Oh, yeah. Way beyond stupid. And again, it comes from our thought that we can solve everything through some form of a law enforcement thing. And that is not necessarily the case. Law enforcement is not the answer to all of our problems. I don't want to shock anybody, but that is simply the case. And as long as we pretend it is, we're going to be losing our ability to actually do things we're capable of doing.
Well, and I think it's unfair to ask the police departments to become our guardians of over everything, make sure that we don't eat too much and screw too many wrong people with bad diseases and smoke all the wrong things and drink all the wrong things and lord over us if we're under financed in our path in life, to pick us up and haul us in and take us behind bars. I would hate to have to go out and arrest somebody because they're broke.
Well, it's interesting when you mention that, because there are societies that in fact do that, but we tend not to look at them as the places we want to be like. I'm thinking of Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they do stuff like that all the time there. And we tend to think when they do it, it's wrong. But when we put a different name on it, it's somehow okay. And I've only, like I said earlier, I only wanted one thing in my whole life, and that was liberty. I just wanted to be free. And I realized that in order for me to have my liberty, I have to see a whole bunch of people who are enjoying their liberty by doing things I don't think they should be doing. But it's them doing it to themselves. It's none of my business.
Exactly. It's nobody's business if you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In fact, in case anybody doesn't know, let's give Peter one more plug. That comes from Peter McWilliams. Ain't Nobody's Business If You Do is the title of the book. And if you haven't read it, you can pick it up at Amazon for $10. Buy it and read it tomorrow. And I guarantee you, if you didn't understand this issue, you will understand it completely after reading him.
Well, we are down to the last minute of the big broadcast today. Peter, anything you want to wrap the show up with?
Well, the only thing, first off, that I have to say is all the people that have heard me would not have heard me over the last 4.5 years if you, in fact, hadn't been doing this show. So I just want to make sure you understand how much you are appreciated at LEAP by giving us the opportunity to do this. Anybody that wants to get in touch with LEAP, you can either Google the word LEAP, L-E-A-P, and I think we're either the first or second thing that pops up. LEAP.cc, cops say legalizedrugs.com. One more thing I want to do one more time because I want to see if I can really get it over the top. I got a thing up on YouTube that is now up to 916,000 hits. It's been up for a little bit over 2 years. I'm trying to get 1 million. I want 1 million. So if anybody, if you Google my name, Peter Christ, it'll be, I think the first thing that pops up will be the YouTube thing. And it's retired police captain demolishes the war on drugs. Please take a look at it. If you think it's worthwhile and you'd like to put your name on it, send it around to friends. Let's get me over 1 million before I go away next week. And Casper, again, thanks for everything, and I'll be talking to you again next week.
All righty, and for those of you who are listening, please make it a point to share us with your friends. That's how we are found. Pass around our apps, pass around our MP3s, pass around our URLs, and share us on Twitter and all your other social media. That's a good way to get the message out. And remember, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah. 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, time for help! Yeah.
Get your smoke on, everybody gather round. My connection came to town. He's got chronic, don't you know? He came straight from Mexico. Buy an eighth or buy an ounce, but here comes the 5-0, so you better bounce. Get your smoke on, get your smoke on. Light up a joint and make it fatty. Get your smoke on. Don't tell my mom, I won't tell your daddy. Get your smoke on. Call your dealer, call him fast. Get your smoke on. This half ounce ain't gonna last. Get your smoke on. So smoke a blunt or smoke a J. Just pack up a bong, low down, I'll be okay. Get your smoke on. Get your smoke on. Legal stuff from Uncle Sam. Get your smoke on. Contraband from Amsterdam. Get your smoke on. Northern Lights and chocolate time. Get your smoke on. So many ways to get you high. Get your smoke on. Oh, I've been feeling all day long, so pack up some product and a 4-foot long. Buy an eighth or buy an ounce, but here comes the 5-0, so you better bounce. Smoke a blunt or smoke a J. Just pack me a bong, low down, I'll be okay. Get your smoke on. 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 Get your smoke on.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.